Hi everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Summer Tomato Live. Unfortunately, I had some audio issues while recording this episode, so rather than put you through an hour of pain and horrible noise, I decided to just re-record the audio and lay it right over the top of the video. So the video and audio might not match up perfectly, so just imagine it's one of those old kung fu movies where they just sound horrible and look funny, and maybe I'll karate chop you with my broccoli. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Summer Tomato Live. I actually got an inch trimmed off my bangs, so hopefully it helps. Summer Tomato Live is your interactive online classroom where I tell you all you need to know about the food and health topics that you voted are the most important. I'm your host, Darya, creator of the website Summer Tomato, where you can find even more healthy eating tips for food lovers. Summer Tomato is also where you can go to find any show notes or any links that I mention during the episode. I've added some already, but I will go back and update those later for anything that we cover during the show. Today we'll be talking about my personal health style menus, which you guys voted as the topic you wanted me to cover this week. This is the first closed episode, meaning that only people watching live right now and who will be able to ask questions at the end are Tomato Slice subscribers. I'm really excited about this because I expect the quality of the questions and the dialogue we have today to be at a much higher level than when the show is open to the general public like it was last time. This is a small group of people who really care. So definitely don't be shy about asking any questions that you have. I really want you to use this opportunity to connect with me and ask any question that you feel comfortable asking, no matter how big or small. For those of you watching for the first time and don't know how it works, subscribers to my newsletter Tomato Slice send in topics they'd like me to cover on the show, and then everyone votes to choose the ones I cover next. I then put together a brief presentation covering the topic, telling you all the important points you need to know, and then give you advice on how to best use this information in your daily life. So subscribers who are watching the show live can then ask questions they have about the topic, and I take those text and video questions for the rest of the hour. Subscribers can also submit questions early via email, which is helpful if for some reason you can't make it to the live show. So if you're watching this as the recorded version and would like to participate in future episodes of Summer Tomato Live, you can subscribe at tinyletter.com/summertomato, which is at the URL at the bottom of the screen right there, and you can sign up there. Tomato Slice newsletter is only $3.99 a month, so it's about $1 a week, and also includes bonus nutrition tips and direct email access to me. So I'll answer any of the questions you have, even if they don't make it onto the show. When you think about it, $1 a week is actually a pretty good deal for this kind of personalized nutrition lessons and advice, and I hope you guys agree. I also want to take a minute to thank you guys who have already subscribed. I've had some amazing conversations with some of you already, and it makes me so happy. You guys are actually making it so that I like email again, which is awesome. So thank you guys so much for signing up early. I've scheduled the next episode already, some of you might have noticed, for Wednesday, March 16th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. So please save the date for that. I apologize for having it 2 Wednesdays in a row. Normally I'd like to stagger it between Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, just so that people who have obligations on the same night every week can still make most of the shows. But this time I had a little bit of a timing conflict because I will be at South by Southwest, which is a tech conference out in Austin, which is really awesome. If any of you guys are going to be there, definitely tweet me up or come find me. I'd love to meet you. I'm going to be getting back from that on March 15th, and then of course the 17th, those of us with some Irish heritage are going to be celebrating St. Patrick's Day and probably drinking some beer and maybe some good Irish whiskey, so I didn't want to schedule a show on St. Patrick's Day. So the only remaining day was Wednesday, March 16th, so I hope you can make it. I'm going to do that at 6:30 p.m. again, and that's Pacific time. Voting for the topic of the next show is live now at Summer Tomato, and actually it was already picked. I'm recording this over, so I might as well tell you it is habits and habit forming, and the following show will be about healthy vegetarian and vegan diets, and I hope to see you there. So that's Wednesday, March 16th is the next show at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. Speaking of dates, March 15th, which is the day before the next show, is the last day to claim your free gifts from Foodsy. So what we've been doing is for the first 150 subscribers to Tomato Slice, we've been giving away a free sample of heirloom cranberry beans from Zursun. Zursun is an amazing company. They have heirloom beans, which are all these varietals of beans that you can't normally get at the grocery store, and they are just amazing. It's an entirely different culinary experience than you're probably used to. So if you've never tried heirloom beans, I highly recommend it. And we're also giving away a free tasting box from Foodsy. This is such a fantastic gift. So basically, Foodsy is this online marketplace for artisan food producers. And they have all these amazing products, and they're all delicious. And the biggest problem with Foodsy is you go onto the website and you're like, wow, well, I pretty much want everything. But the thing about the tasting box is they select 6 of their favorite items for you and then send it to you every month like a little Christmas present. so you get a good sampling of what they have to offer. And what's really nice about the samples is that they're fairly small, so you don't feel like you lose much if you don't like something, you didn't waste a bunch of money. But if you do like something, you know what you want to go back for and get later. So the tasting box is a great, great service, and we definitely have some room left. So if you're curious about Tomato Slice or heirloom beans or Foodsy, this is a great opportunity to try those out. Just sign up at tinyletter.com/summertomato, and if you already have signed up, don't forget to go over to Foodsy by March 15th and claim those prizes. Like I mentioned earlier, you guys voted that today we will be talking about my personal health style. And at first, I was a little reluctant to add this topic to the list of voting and talk for, whatever, half an hour about my own habits. And the reason for that is that I worry that if I talk too much about what I do, that people will think that that's what they should do and that that's the only way to health. And I have really always tried to avoid that at Summer Tomato. I really believe everybody needs to find their own health style and figure out what works for you and take it from there. And that's why Summer Tomato has never been a personal blog. That being said, I have had people ask me about my personal health habits a lot. And I can understand the value in seeing what I do because it sort of gives you an insight into what is possible and what is an example, or a few concrete examples to go on. And also, you can see what goes on behind the decision making and the process of creating a health style. And I hope that that's the message you guys take home from this today. Sort of what goes on, how you go about making the decisions to figure out what is the best for your health style. So if you're really curious about this stuff, I actually did start a personal blog. It's at daryapino.com, where I tend to keep track of my personal health style a little bit more. But the problem is it's a small blog and not a real serious project, and I'm so busy that I don't update it as much as I'd like to. It's also a great place for people who are curious about San Francisco. I do a lot of San Francisco restaurant reviews and stuff like that on there, but I don't update it very often. So yeah, so this is generally probably going to be the first and only time I'm going to go through this sort of what I do, eat healthy every single day of my life. So I hope you enjoy it. And also, if you haven't grabbed a glass of wine already, I highly recommend it. Cheers. Okay, so another important point I hope you take from this episode is that it is often necessary to change your health style. And that is another reason why I was avoiding putting something of my own as an example, because sometimes your life changes. And as you go through different phases of your life, you need to learn to adapt your health style so that it doesn't get out of whack. So I've been going through this recently, and I will point these things out throughout the program. When I started Summer Tomato, it was 2 years ago, and for about a year and a half, my health style was pretty stable. But as some of you know, about 6 months ago, I changed from being a single graduate student on a very tight budget in San Francisco, which is a very expensive city, to being a self-employed member of a 2-person, 1-puppy household. Now I also have a very active social life, much more active than I had in the past. And I've had to adjust my habits to deal with these new circumstances. And in this episode, I'll explain how I've been working to do that. I certainly haven't mastered it yet, There are still things to work out, but I'm working on it, and it's something that all of us face at some point or another. So, moving on. The hardest part about creating a health style, really, is getting started. And the reason it's so hard to get started is because of habits. So think for a second about how much you do each day without thinking. You do what you always do, and you probably do what's easiest. And to do something different really takes effort. It's not that difficult, it just takes some thought, and most of us go through our day without thinking much. But the problem with that is in today's food environment, it's very difficult to make healthy choices unless they're built into your daily routine. So you can't expect that health will sort of come upon you. You got to make sure that you schedule it into your life. Habits are very difficult to form. They're also very difficult to break. But the reality is that habits are the essence of your health style, and it takes some effort to create the ones you need to keep healthy. You have food habits whether you think about them or not. And if you want to live a long, healthy life, you need to make sure that your habits are set up to get you there. Luckily, most of the effort is at the very beginning of the journey. And once you have them formed, it's just as hard to break the good ones as it is to break the bad ones. So you really just have to put in some initial work in the beginning and tweak it along the way. But for the most part, the initial effort is going to be the most difficult. But it's really not as hard as it sounds. And the trick to forming new habits, so the way I look at this is you can form new habits, but what they need to be is either easier, more fun, or more important than any other alternative you could possibly choose. So for example, for me, going to the farmer's market is 1,000 times more fun than shopping at Safeway or even at Whole Foods. And this for me easily counterbalances the inconveniences of having to go to the market at a specific time each week. So when I first decided that I wanted to start going to the farmer's market, it wasn't easy to get up at 9 a.m. and, drag myself out of bed, and you're out Friday night and it's cold outside and you just want to stay in bed. But once I experienced what it's like to be at the farmer's market and what a joy it is to talk to the vendors and be outside on a crisp Saturday morning and see all the beautiful produce, I couldn't help but bring my camera and start taking pictures all the time. You realize what a pleasure it is. And once you have gone several times in a row, you grow accustomed to having a refrigerator full of delicious, amazing produce. And if you miss 1 week, you realize how much it can screw up your entire week. So this is one smart decision. To go to the farmer's market every Saturday makes my entire week of food decisions that much easier. Because it's a lot easier on a Tuesday night to know that you have amazing broccoli in the fridge as opposed to going down the street and getting a burrito if you had nothing in the fridge that would be an easier solution. But if you have food in your fridge and you know it's amazing, it's a lot easier to just cook it, which is the kind of habit you need to build if you want to build a really successful health style. So I set up my habits so that the default solution, for example, what I'm eating for breakfast, what I'm eating for lunch, when I work out, is the easiest and the healthiest and preferably the tastiest. So what I'm going to do for you today is take you through a typical daily meal plan. What I do when I get up in the morning, what I eat for lunch and snack and dinner and all that. Obviously, I don't eat the same thing every day, so I'll go through the different variations of what I choose for those meals and let you know where I sometimes deviate and what parts of those meals have changed for me over the last year and how I've adapted my health style to these new situations. Obviously, every week brings up new situations and challenges, but I can say that while the way I eat is not intended as a weight loss diet, when I follow it very, very closely and don't have as many exception and special occasion meals, I do tend to lose weight. So what I do is I use my special occasion treat meals to balance out any weight fluctuations I have. So if my pants start feeling a little tight, I eat a few less desserts, less flour products, less bread, fewer sandwiches. If my pants are feeling really loose and I feel like I'm losing my curves and it's no longer sexy, then I might treat myself to an extra scoop of ice cream or my vice of choice, good Mexican food and a beer. So that's how I strike the balance there. All right, so let me just give you the basic outline of what is like my perfect healthy day and where it can go awry. So let's start at breakfast. Breakfast, I really believe, should be the easiest for everyone. If you don't know what to do for breakfast, you need to find like 3 or 4 things you like that are healthy and make sure those things are always in your kitchen. Because breakfast is a no-brainer. It's a win. Every once in a while, you go out and have brunch or something, but for the most part, you have absolute control over your meal. You're probably not thinking very hard about it, and you probably actually don't care what it is. You just want to eat and get it over with. And so I think breakfast is a great opportunity to start your day off on the right foot. What I was eating for my personal health style, and I've written about this before on Summer Tomato, is yogurt with muesli. And I just want to show you what I use. Everyone asks me about this all the time. So I prefer plain yogurt, and I prefer yogurt with fat in it. I found that plain yogurts without fat are really, really sour and watery and gross. So these days I've been eating Greek yogurt. It's 2% fat, it's phage, or phage, and it's delicious. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's cows or grass-fed. I'm going to guess they're probably not. I think grass-fed would be a better choice, but I don't get too picky about the yogurt as long as it doesn't have sugar in it, and that's my #1 requirement. So I take a little bit of yogurt and then I put muesli on it. So what muesli is it's a mixture of grains, nuts, seeds, dried fruit, and it has no added sugar. So it's basically like a granola, but with no added sugar. I get this brand right here. It's called Dorset. And I pour a little bit of it, about 1/4 of a cup, 1/2 a cup, something like that, on my yogurt and just mix it around, and it's delicious. What I do is I actually keep it here in a container like this. So these are really cool. I use these a lot for a lot of things. They're plastic, airtight, the poppy thing opens, and it seals tight. So these are wonderful, and that's a no-brainer for breakfast. So if you're looking for breakfast, I highly recommend that. It's a really good start, and it keeps you satisfied. I recommend it. The other thing, though, that I've been eating more of lately, because I wanted to see if dairy maybe was messing with my skin a little bit, which I think it actually was. So I've been trying to cut out a little bit of dairy, and to replace it, I've been eating a ton of eggs. And I found that for breakfast, just scrambling up 2 eggs served with some salsa, and I also like kimchi, is a fantastic breakfast. So one of the reasons I started using yogurt in the first place for breakfast is because I sometimes have stomach problems. I've had them since I was a kid. And I thought the probiotics in yogurt would help, and indeed they did. So when I started switching away from yogurt, I wanted to make sure that I was still getting some probiotics in my digestive system. Kimchi is a spicy Korean cabbage mixture that you can just buy at the grocery store, and it's a natural source of probiotics, as is sauerkraut. So I've been eating more sauerkraut and kimchi, and it's great with eggs. I love it, so I've been eating that a lot lately. Also, every morning I drink tea. I used to drink coffee, and I've written about how hard it is to get off coffee. I actually couldn't do it until I finished my PhD because I didn't have the attention span to do it. But these days I'm off the coffee and I've been drinking loose leaf teas. And here's an example. Actually, I can show you. One sec. Okay, these teas, we get them at Red Blossom. They're great. It's a nice alternative to coffee. The only other thing I do sometimes at breakfast, and this is an example of something that in my new Healthstyle and I didn't used to do, is we have this local place here called Samovar Tea Lounge where we go and get tea. And Samovar has a lot of different options for breakfast, and sometimes I'll go there. One of the biggest changes I've made in the last year that I've had to adapt to is that I eat out a lot more. And it's not good. I don't recommend that. But I realize it's just sort of something that's part of my new life, and I just have to learn to deal with it. The nice thing is that Samovar has a lot of healthy options, and normally what I might get is something like an egg bowl. It's 2 scoops of brown rice, and there's some, inside the rice there's some mixed edamame, which are soybeans, and some red pepper and some seaweed in there, and a couple eggs on top, and a couple little pieces of smoked duck, and a little bit of soy sauce on the side. And it's tasty and delicious, and they have a couple other healthy dishes that I eat a lot, like tea soup. But that, like I said, is not my ideal, but it's a healthy-ish alternative for when I have to eat out. So that's it for breakfast. If it's a weekend and I have a little more time, I might make a dish. I really do enjoy a good Mexican breakfast with beans and guacamole and all that good stuff. But otherwise, you might as well just keep breakfast simple, in my opinion. So moving on to lunch. I think that lunch you should approach very similarly to breakfast. On weekdays, most of us know where we are going to be during the day and have control over what we eat. And I think lunch is another thing where if you can standardize it, it's going to be healthier for you. So during the summer especially, and most of the year if I can, I love to have salads for lunch. A big salad is refreshing and delicious. It's one of my favorite things to eat. I've included in the show notes a post I wrote called 10 Ways to Make Your Salad More Satisfying. So I don't just recommend eating a big pile of lettuce for lunch, because the problem is if you just eat a pile of lettuce with some tomatoes or something, you're going to be really hungry in about 2 to 3 hours. And you really need your lunch to last you closer to 6 hours or maybe more. And so it's really important that you have some protein in there and maybe some fat in there as well. So what I'll do is I'll add some beans or lentils, or maybe even some grains like quinoa or brown rice or farro. Those are all great additions to salads. Nuts are another great one. I don't know if I already said maybe eggs. Eggs are good too. And these are things you can do to make the salad more substantial. And that's, for me, is a perfect lunch. I love it. Soups are also good in the winter. It's basically like a blended up salad, right? So vegetarian soups are fine, meat soups, it doesn't matter. I just think they're wonderful. And oh, by the way, I do eat meat. And you can also throw meat into any of the dishes I mentioned. I tend to not eat a lot of meat because it's expensive, so I usually reserve my meat eating for when I go out. But sometimes, and especially more recently, I do cook some meat at home. But I'll get to dinner in a second. Another great thing to have for lunch is leftovers. So if you're very good about planning and enjoy making big batches of food, leftovers are a great thing to have for lunch. Just heat them up. I eat leftovers for lunch. I tend to not eat them as much for dinner, but they're great for lunch. And also, I sometimes go to Samovar for lunch as well. And there I'll usually get a salad or some other type of vegetable bowl or something like that. When I was a grad student, actually it was a lot easier. It was really easy back then. We had a big fridge at the office where we could store things, and we also had a microwave. So I would just bring in salad fixings, maybe some spinach, some arugula, tomatoes, a cucumber, some carrots. And I always had either some lentils or beans and some kind of grain like quinoa. And I would microwave the beans or grains for a few seconds and then throw them into my salad, which makes it warm, it's nice. And then toss in some olive oil and vinegar and salt and pepper, which I would keep at my desk. And I would just make these beautiful salads. And people would always be like, oh, wow, that's so beautiful, so amazing, so much color. And I actually had everyone jealous of my salads. And that makes me really happy when people are jealous of my healthy food. I just think it's awesome. So that's a good option if you work somewhere and have access to a refrigerator, and you don't have to prepare your salad at home. You can make it there. I love doing that. And it prevents it from getting soggy if you dress the salad early. So that's a great option if you have that available to you. Let me get a sip of water here. So after lunch, I do snack. One of the main reasons that I snack is that I tend to work out in the afternoons, and it's really hard for me to get through a workout if I'm hungry. So I rely on snacks basically to survive my workouts, just to tide me over until dinner if I did eat a salad for lunch and I didn't make it big enough or whatever. So snacks for me, I prefer they have protein or fat. Like nuts are great, although you need to be careful with nuts because it's easy to eat too many and you have to train yourself to eat no more than 10 or 12. Yogurt is another great option. Like if you have eggs for breakfast, you wouldn't normally want to eat eggs twice in one day. But it's a good filling snack to have. Eggs are fantastic too. So you can switch those two off. You'll notice that I eat a lot of eggs. They'll really tide you over for hours, even though it's just this tiny little thing. It's pretty fantastic. Sometimes, and I'll do this if I'm really desperate or don't have anything else in the fridge, I'll just take some beans or some lentils and chop up some parsley or maybe some cilantro or some other herb and add some olive oil all into a bowl with a little salt and pepper and just stir it up and eat that. I think beans are wonderful. And if you've been following along in the blog for more than like a day, you'll know that I love lentils too, and I eat them all the time. And usually what I like to do is just make one big batch of something. And then I use that, whatever it is, the beans or the lentils or whatever, and I use it all week and just throw it in different dishes and use it as either my protein source or my carbohydrate source. And these will give you, I swear, the best workouts. Like beans are the best fuel for a workout I've ever found. I think they're just awesome. So in my pantry, I have these beautiful little containers with different kinds of beans. So right here, these are some chickpeas, and the same containers I keep the muesli in. And here's an example of some calypso beans, these beautiful little black and white beans. One sec. Oh. And basically what you can do is I just have these stacked up in my pantry, and you look in there and they are so beautiful. How could you not want to cook them? So I make big batches and then I eat them all week in different dishes. And you can use beans to make any dish more substantial and tasty, especially if you get these heirloom beans. You'll see what I mean. It's not at all like draining some kidney beans and throwing them in a salad. Those are pretty gross in a salad. Well, sorry, not gross. They're fine. I mean, both the taste and the texture are very, very different than these very delicious and wonderful heirloom beans. So I strongly recommend that. It's probably my favorite thing. All right, so moving on to dinner. So a really good Darya, cooks dinner for herself or makes dinner at home in some form. And for a long time, I almost exclusively cooked because when you're really busy, and I mean, I was working on my PhD and working to build a website and doing a lot of things. And honestly, when you cook vegetables, it's faster, cheaper, easier to clean, easier to eat. It's tasty. It's really tasty, and it's just the easiest dinner. So I would just cook myself, like kale, just some big batch of vegetables, and maybe throw some beans or some nuts in there, or maybe some grains, and like I said, maybe some eggs if I was extra hungry. But like I said, I generally save my meat eating for going out because to me it's a lot more work to cook and clean. I know some of you love cooking meat, and that's fine, but for me it's just a lot of work. So dinners are best when you cook them yourself. I cook almost everything in olive oil. People always ask me what kind of oil I use to cook. Sometimes I use coconut or tea oil. Coconut oil is usually, I use it when I cook Asian food, like Thai food. I use coconut oil because it has a really unique flavor, and it's a little creamier, and it's good for you. Actually, the New York Times just wrote about how it's good for you now, and I thought that was awesome. I mean, I've always said that coconut oil is good for you, even though it's, a so-called saturated fat or whatever, but it's fine. It's totally good for you. The other thing I use sometimes is something I recently got called tea oil, which I actually got at Samovar. They're selling it there, and I'd never heard of it before, but it's fairly healthy for you, and it has a much higher smoking point. So if I'm cooking something that I know needs to be cooked really hot and and it also has a very neutral flavor. So if those are the characteristics I'm looking for and I don't want to use olive oil, I'll sometimes use the tea oil. Tea is tea seed oil, actually. So dinner, I always make sure I also have some sort of substantial protein. Lately, I actually have been, like I said, I have been cooking more meat for dinner. And I found that it's fairly straightforward if you remember to salt it beforehand and don't overcook stuff. So for most people, the two biggest problems that you'll have with cooking and making stuff taste good is that you either don't put enough salt on it or you overcook it. So proper cooking length and proper salting will make almost any meal better. And the other thing that almost always makes any meal better if you're troubleshooting is a little bit of acid. So like a squirt of lemon or a splash of vinegar. That'll often fix things too, especially things that are bitter or bland. So generally, I've kind of gotten over my fear of cooking meat now that I'm cooking for me and someone else who likes to eat meat. It makes it easier because it's really kind of hard to make enough vegetables to fill up 2 people for dinner. It's easy to make enough vegetables to fill up 1 person. When it was just me, I would eat just a big bunch of kale myself with some nuts or beans or whatever, and that was fine. But for 2 people, that would take a lot of more work, and so meat is a good source of calories when you're looking to add protein and fat, which are things you need. And I really like to do stir fries, either with 1 vegetable or a few vegetables. I always, or almost always, include a green leafy vegetable. Let me show you the stuff I'm talking about. This is the broccoli. So this is the kind of broccoli I get. It's probably different than the kind you get. It's these tiny little florets that I get at the farmer's market. I leave the leaves on, and they're just sweet and delicious, and I'll throw something like that with. I do like to add nuts into my cooking. Alternatively, it depends on the season. So in the summertime, I'll throw maybe some red pepper in there, like a bell pepper, maybe some squash. In the winter, I sometimes cook winter squash. So this is a delicata squash. And these things are awesome. If you've never cooked a delicata squash, it's almost exactly like a butternut squash in flavor, except better. And you don't have to peel them, and they cook way faster. And there's a smaller serving size, so you don't have to make enough for an entire army because the butternut squash are really big. So it's awesome. I love these things. You just cut them up in half, scoop out the seeds. I should post a recipe for this. I'll do that in the next week or so. Note to everyone, I did post a recipe for that. You can find it at summertomato.com. And scoop out the seeds and chop it up like this and toss it with some olive oil and a little bit of salt and toss it in the oven at 425 for like 20 to 30 minutes, and then toss it with some greens. And that's a staple winter dinner for me. I also like to eat potatoes sometimes. Sweet potatoes are good. Regular potatoes are good. I'm not scared of potatoes. And what other vegetables? Cauliflower is good. You guys have probably seen my awesome cauliflower recipe. I'll go back and add that to the show notes as well. If you just search on my site for roasted curry cauliflower, it's awesome. And basically, these are all just side dishes. Someone asked me about portions. I'll have maybe 4 to 6 ounces of meat, and then just the rest of my plate will be just a giant pile of vegetables, and they're delicious. What else? So that's what I cook if I cook at home for myself on a simple night. Sometimes I definitely make more fancy meals. Maybe on a weekend I'll find something special at the farmer's market or for someone's birthday. Or maybe I just found a cool recipe like Dosa's fire broth that I posted a couple weeks ago. And that's a little more complicated than what I'd normally do at home, but I'd probably do what you guys do in those situations and, just find a good recipe and go get the ingredients and then you make it. But sometimes cooking is just not in the cards. And so for me, there are a couple different options that I do in those situations. Probably the most reliable for me is to go to Whole Foods or the specialty store we have in San Francisco that I wish I could take all of you to. It's so awesome. It's called Buy Right. It's just this amazing grocery store. And both of these places have fantastic delis. And deli is not the right word. They have a selection of pre-made food, tons of vegetables, healthy organic stuff, different kinds of meats, and you can kind of pick and choose what you want. Whole Foods it's bigger, so it's amazing because you can get one of you can get Mexican food and the other person can get Indian food, and all of it's pretty healthy. And so sometimes we'll do that, if it's late and we want to go grocery shopping because we don't have anything in the house to cook, and we'll go buy some stuff for the next few days. But after you finish grocery shopping, it's already 8 o'clock at night, and you sort of want to just pick up dinner while you're there because you don't really want to go home and cook after doing all that shopping. So you just want something you can just take home and eat right away. And so it's really tasty, and it still feels like it's really healthy because it's food that I would cook, but they cooked it, which is fine. So they often have a buy right. Especially, they have these delicious bean salads, which is very similar to something I would make because I eat so many beans. They also have this thing called farro, and this is it right here. And if you guys don't know what farro is, it's a grain. I cook it all the time now. So it looks a lot like wheat, but it's different. And I don't think it has the same kind of gluten as wheat. I love it. I love it way more than quinoa, way more than brown rice. And so I'll buy farro salads from Buy Right and a couple of pieces of meat and maybe some roasted vegetables and call it a night. So that's a good time. But like I said, I go out a lot more now, and there are a few neighborhood places I go. We go out for sushi once or twice a week. We really like sushi, and it's good that it's fish. I think it's really important to eat fish. 2 to 3 times a week is a good goal. And so that's something. If I know I'm going out and need to eat fish, I'll try to eat a fish dish frequently if I go out to restaurants. And also there's a restaurant nearby that I love. It's probably my favorite restaurant in San Francisco. It's called Bar Jules. And we're really, 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 really lucky here in San Francisco that we have these amazing restaurants that use the exact same ingredients I do. Like, seriously, on the menu it'll say it's from the same farm that I buy stuff from at the farmer's market. And they basically cook it exactly the way I would cook it. Or I would cook it if I could stay at home all day planning dinner every single day of the week. But obviously I don't do that. But it's nice that they do. So sometimes we'll go out and I don't feel bad about eating there ever because the food is really, really high quality. It's basically the same stuff I would cook and eat anyway. But like I said, I don't cook as often as I used to. And I'm just really, really lucky to have these alternatives. Also, I mentioned tea with breakfast. So it's fair to say that I almost always have wine with dinner. Almost always. I'll talk about alcohol a little bit more in a second. But a glass or two of wine is pretty common for me. So somebody had actually written in and was asking about portions. And first I just wanted to make a couple quick points about portions. So portions are really the last thing you should worry about. Eat until you're hungry. I like to eat vegetables, but the most important thing is the composition of your meals. So choose healthy stuff and eat until you're full, or at least until you're not hungry. I like to eat, I'm pretty happy with a full plate of vegetables, but some people aren't. So just keep eating more. But if it's important, it is important, even if you're eating a big plate of vegetables, that you get some protein and fat. Otherwise, you'll be hungry really soon. Personally, I eat grains only 1 or 2 times a day, sometimes 0. Not usually 3. That would be a lot for me. I also really recommend eating slowly and chewing thoroughly. So basically, to sort of wrap this up, the habits that I have that are the backbone of my health style are cooking, shopping, like I said, shopping at the farmer's market and at grocery stores, and balancing how healthy I am, how well I stick to the plan that I just read you versus how often I go out and have fun and do things like that. It's pretty easy. Because of that, I know what to scale back on if for some reason I'm leaning too much toward fun and my pants are getting a little tight. I know exactly what to do. I go back to my default of cooking, shopping, and eating healthy food. So I'll give you a quick summary of what I buy at the farmer's market. Obviously, my grocery lists are always published on Summer Tomato on Sundays, and all my farmer's market purchases are there. And generally the way I approach the farmer's market is I'll almost always get kale. I often get broccoli, chard, spinach, arugula, salad mix, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. I consider all those green leafy vegetables, and they're good for both cooking and raw, so that takes care of lunches and dinners. And then I supplement those green leafy vegetables that I buy with what I call supplemental vegetables. So in the winter, that would be carrots, potatoes, parsnips, squash, cauliflower, etc. In the spring, it's going to lean more toward carrots, peas, asparagus, fennel, and mushrooms. In the summer, it would be peppers, summer squash, eggplant, and tomatoes. And in the fall, well, in San Francisco, summer and fall are basically the same. So it's pretty much the same ones there. And then also at the farmer's market, I make sure to buy something as the basis of flavor. So, and like seasoning. So I like to buy onions. I don't buy those big yellow ones. I buy these small little shallots, little purple onions or leeks. I always buy garlic, and I always make sure to buy some herbs. My favorites are parsley. I get the flat leaf Italian parsley, it's better. Cilantro, thyme, mint, oregano. Any fresh herb is great. It's also good to have a little bit of acid, so maybe buy a lime or a lemon. And sometimes the farmer's market has nuts, which I said I like to cook with a lot. So walnuts, almonds, pistachios, whatever they have. And I do buy a little bit of fruit. You probably know what I get. In the winter, it's citrus, pomegranates, and pears. In the spring, it's cherries, berries, and a little bit of citrus, just the tail end of the citrus season. In the summer, it's mostly stone fruit, which are the ones with the little pits, like peaches, plums, nectarines, and also berries. And in the fall, you get the apples, the persimmons, the pears, and the pomegranates. And I also get my meats at the farmer's market, actually, and eggs at the farmer's market. People will probably also ask me about bread, which I don't really buy bread, but sometimes I'll get a fresh artisan loaf for a specific dish while I'm at the farmer's market. And I can never eat it all, so what I'll do is I'll cut it up and stick the rest in the freezer. It actually defrosts really well. At 325 in the oven, just defrosts beautifully. It's just like fresh baked bread. I also only buy artisan bread from local bakeries. I never buy the packaged bread in plastic. But sometimes I actually make my own bread, and I have a grain grinder attachment for the KitchenAid, and we'll grind our own flour and make some bread using that. I forget the original author, but I know Mark Bittman of the New York Times published the No Knead bread recipe, and it's no KNEAD bread. And we do that maybe every 1 or 2 months, not that often. Just it's mostly more for fun. So someone asked me about supplements. I take a multivitamin. I'm really not fancy about my supplements. I know some people are super fancy about their supplements. I just take a multivitamin from Trader Joe's. It's called Super Crusade. I actually only take half a dose. And I do take vitamin D3 drops. I think the brand is Carlson. And they're just little drops that you put under the tongue. And I do that because I got my vitamin D tested and it was really low, which doesn't surprise me because San Francisco is really cloudy and we're not at a very high, or we're at a very high latitude, so we don't get direct sunlight. Alcohol, I mostly stick to wine. I do drink on most days. I occasionally drink beer. It's a weakness of mine. I love it. And I do occasionally have a cocktail. I prefer ones without sugar, Manhattans and stuff like that. I'm a whiskey girl. I like whiskey drinks. Sweets. So this is an important one. So sweets, I never keep at home. The only thing even remotely related to sweets is dark chocolate in my house. I never keep it in any other sweets in the house. And I actually lost my taste for sugar, which I can't even tell you how weird that is. I used to have a really, really, really bad sweet tooth. And once I changed my diet, it just sort of went away. I even sometimes forget to eat the fruit I have in the house, which is totally bizarre. So if I do eat sugar, though, I try to make sure it's expensive. What I mean by that is, you know, nicer desserts and stuff that's costs more money. Because I think it's good when your sweets are expensive. It makes it hard to eat them too often. And someone asked me what my weaknesses are. So definitely alcohol, beer, and cocktails. Like I love that stuff. I love bread and sandwiches, but like I said, I don't keep them in the house. I order them when I go out. I also adore Mexican food. I love tortilla chips and guacamole. I can eat it forever. And I do love some Asian foods that are probably not super healthy, like rice dishes, and I love rice noodles and whatnot. And then someone asked also if I portion out my snacks. I do. I just try to make sure that I have a discrete amount. And if it's something like a nut, I just make sure to eat, like an almond, for example, I just eat 12. And I eat them very slowly. And then I drink water until I'm not thinking about food anymore. Let's see. I talked a little bit about restaurants, but we're really lucky in San Francisco, and I don't have to make a lot of difficult decisions about where I go, because every restaurant offers what I would consider pretty close to healthy food. But, you know, I do like Mexican food as an option for a healthy alternative. You can get unhealthy Mexican food, but you can also get very healthy Mexican food. Greek food tends to be good and healthy. Lebanese food tends to be healthy, but I don't get caught up in stuff like that if I'm out. I just enjoy myself. And someone asked me if I keep a food diary. I do not right now, but I have in the past, and I think it's a great way to find what your strengths and weaknesses are if you aren't accustomed to following your own diet. So that's it. That took forever. Sorry. Awesome. Let's take questions. How's it going? Anyway, so Suzanne needs suggestions for high-quality vegetarian and vegan foods, which are also low-carb and low GI. So that's pretty easy. I would say beans are your best bet. I actually just found a study that said beans are very, very, very low glycemic index, GI, and they have a very low impact on blood sugar compared to grains and many other carbs. So beans are my recommendation. There's a post on Summer Tomato called Healthy Vegetarian Sources of Protein. It's really long and well written by a vegetarian reader who really, really knows what he's talking about. So you should check that out for sure. You can use a little search bar and search for vegetarian protein. So great question. Oh yeah, and if you call in and would like to talk, I'm happy to take calls as well. Just make sure you have your little earbuds in. Okay, I like this question. It's not really a question, but it's something that's definitely fun to talk about. So we used to spend 25% of our income on food, and now we spend less than 10%. Thoughts? Yeah, I think it's probably why we eat too much. I spend like all my money on food. Well, just kidding. Not to say that everyone should do that, but for me, it's very important, and the reason is because, well, I mean, it's obvious. You want clean food, you want safe food, and those foods don't come from the industries. Industrial foods are artificially cheap, and that's why we don't pay that much for them. What happens is you get all these empty junk calories and all these chemicals and all this processing, and I think it's really, really dangerous. So I definitely recommend people make smarter decisions about how they eat and try to focus on quality over quantity, and I think that's the issue. For some reason, we had that switched over the last 50 years. Everyone just wanted the best deal, and I definitely would like to see that reversed. So I think that's a really good question. Thank you, Danny. All right, this is fun. Laura asked how I recover from going on a food bender. So we've all done this. It's rough. So I just follow a food bender day. Well, for me, what a food bender is when I go home and visit my family in Southern California and go out to a Mexican place and decide that I'm just going to have as much guacamole and as many beers as I want. And basically then the next day, I'll just try to make it a light day. So once you're stable with your health style, these days don't really impact you very much. You just don't want to do it day after day after day. Once or twice every month is fine. And I'm generally not as hungry the next day, so I'll have a lighter lunch, light dinner, make sure I hit the gym, drink lots of water, you know, just sort of take it easy. And if you have a normal health style that you're comfortable with and you're not trying to gain or lose weight, but you're pretty happy, these things shouldn't be too much of an issue. You might want to do it less often if you're trying to actually lose weight. Okay, next question. So Andrea asks, are pressure cookers necessary for anything other than saving time to cook beans? Absolutely not. That's what they're for. And they're a little bit wily. They make these funny noises and whatnot. So if you don't feel comfortable using one, you definitely don't have to use a pressure cooker. Beans can take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours to cook, depending on the bean and depending on how long you soaked it for. But you know, if you don't want to use a pressure cooker, you don't have to. Go nuts. Personally, for me, it's easier because you know I can just throw the beans in there at the very beginning of cooking a meal and then cook the rest of my dinner, and I'll make a huge batch and then I'll eat them for the rest of the week. But no, it's definitely not necessary. If you don't want to have a pressure cooker or you don't want to spend the money or whatever, you're welcome to just cook beans on the stove. You can do it in a pot, the old-fashioned way. Great question. So next question, do you find this way to be, eating this way to be expensive? I'm on a limited budget. Suggestions. So I love this question. My experience is, and this shocks everybody, that I actually saved money when I started eating this way. And the reason is, you know, if you're a college student, and and I was a college student forever. Uh, and burritos are sort of a pretty normal food. And those things, I mean, in San Francisco, those things can go for like $5 to $6. But a bunch of kale at the grocery store or even at the farmer's market, I've never seen for more than $2. Even the organic fancy kale isn't more than $2. And beans, if you buy dry beans, even if you buy the expensive ones, like the heirloom ones tend to be a little more expensive, but if you calculate it out per meal, it's still only a few dollars. And I've found that having limited meat at home, you're focusing largely on vegetables and beans and grains instead of just fruits. So most people go to the farmer's market thinking it's really expensive because they look at apples and go, oh my gosh, $2 a pound for apples or $3 a pound for tomatoes. That's ridiculous. But these are fruits and they're very easily damaged. But vegetables are actually still really, really cheap. And so are beans and legumes and eggs. I ate a ton of eggs. So no, I don't think it's expensive at all. What is expensive is going out. Going out to restaurants, even cheap restaurants, is more expensive than cooking at home. Oh, and drinking is expensive. So, great question. That's a good one. This one's interesting. So, how would I limit the number of times I eat canned sardines or salmon? That's a good question. So, presumably, I kind of wish you'd call in, but presumably what you're worried about is the canning process and the preservatives, I'm assuming. That is something to be concerned about, but I think you should be more concerned about getting enough omega-3s and protein. So I'm having trouble answering this because I don't have the data in front of me about how bad those numbers are. For example, salt. So if your question is about the smoking of the fish and the preservatives involved, it's not as healthy as fresh fish, that's for sure. But I do think it's probably more dangerous to miss out on that healthy fat and the healthy protein. And if I learn anything more about this, I'll email you. Sorry, I don't have a better answer right now. Thanks for the question, though. Okay, moving on. A local. So, what local farmer in the Bay Area do you buy your eggs from? Haha, great question. So, I have a few favorites. Thank you for asking. Recently, I've been buying my eggs from the Fatted Calf store over in Hayes Valley, and I forget what the brand is. It's not one that I've seen at the farmer's market, but their eggs are amazing. I love the eggs from Soul Food Farm, and you can get those at the Prather Ranch counter in the Ferry Building. I also love the eggs at Marin Sun Farms. I think those might be my very favorite, actually. Their eggs are phenomenal. Unfortunately, they only have them at certain times of the year, though, because if it gets too cold, chickens stop laying eggs, which most people forget because we buy fake industrial chicken that, real chickens stop laying eggs when it gets cold. And let's see, sometimes Happy Quail has eggs, sometimes Marin Roots Farm has eggs. I don't buy the Petaluma eggs. I think those are just sort of fake industrial eggs. They're organic, but I don't buy their business model. Let's see. So I hope that answers your question. They're all pretty different, though. Actually, the different eggs from different farms taste different, and it's based largely on what the farms are feeding the chickens. But they're all great eggs, and they all whip up beautifully. And I find that it's always worth the extra money to get the farm fresh eggs. They're just wonderful, especially. Eggs have been dangerous lately, and it's just nice to have good, clean eggs. Next question. Okay, do you ever use butter? And what do you think of products like Smart Balance? I use butter. I don't use Smart Balance. Butter is good for you. Woohoo! The whole hoopla about saturated fat, I think, was largely overblown. I think almost all nutrition scientists are getting on board with this now. There's still holdouts, but it definitely overblown is the truth for saturated fat. So I think butter's great. I like to put some lemon zest in there with some parsley, make some herb butter. It's amazing. I think those fake butter products, even the ones that say they don't have trans fat, makes me nervous. All the processing, all the processed foods make me really, really nervous. I mean, we found out that most of the margarines were killing people and making heart disease way worse than normal butter. So actually, if you read the book that I wrote about today on the blog called why we get fat over at Summer Tomato, you'll see what I mean. You'll see why I don't worry about butter. And it's delicious too. Actually, I highly recommend it. Great question. Okay, so we do have time actually for one last question. Let's see here. Any recommendation on pressure cookers for beans? Presto, I like the Fagor brand, and I'll link to it in the show notes. It's really great. So that's what I use. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm going to try and make this recording available to subscribers early. I guess I didn't do that, but I still haven't worked out the details on that. But at the latest, it will be available next week for sure. Thanks to all of you for your wonderful questions, and to Zersun and Foodsy for your sponsorships. And once again, the next show will be Wednesday, March 16th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. And if you want to sign up, go to tinyletter.com/summertomato. Hope to see you then. Thank you. I will karate chop you. Wow.